Hello, everyone. I hope you all are well and off to a great start this school year. As folks continue to pour in, I will go over just a few housekeeping rules. So first, we're asking all attendees to remain on mute during the discussion. We really appreciate it. However, we do want this conversation to have your input, and we also wanted to have your insights throughout the conversation. So please feel free to engage and share your thoughts in the chat. As you may have heard with the sound, is we're going to be recording this session, and that's always indicated in your top left corner. So just want to give everyone a heads up that this session will be recorded. My name is Kyle. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and I serve as Director of Culture and Community Engagement here at the district's DEI office. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel discussion today. So with that, I want to welcome you all to our Equity in Practice series, and I really appreciate you all stopping by. For those who aren't familiar, I'll just go give a little quick background. The Equity in Practice series is a collection of community learning opportunities hosted by the school district of Philadelphia's DEI office, always in collaboration with district staff, community advocates, and also community organizations, all of whom are focused on equity, cultural awareness, and social justice. So this month, we're celebrating Hispanic/Latine Heritage Month. So this is a great opportunity to celebrate and learn more about the beautiful culture of the Hispanic and Latine community. And we're hoping that this panel discussion will highlight this today and serve as a resource for everyone moving forward. So without much delay, I will take time to introduce our panelists, and I think it's fitting to start with our guests. So we have Luz Matas, Maria de Luz Matas Mendoza. Dr. Mendoza is an associate professor of Spanish at the Department of Global Studies and Modern Languages at Drexel University. She is from Mexico City, and she is a variationist, a social linguist, specialized in the Mexican Spanish. More recently, her research interest encompasses the relationship between language, migration, and the food ways to shape identity. She is the chair of the Education Committee at the Mexican Cultural Center, a wonderful organization whose mission is to disseminate Latino culture, especially Mexican culture in the Delaware Valley. Luz, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting the MCC.
Absolutely. Next, we have Doris. Doris Acevedo. Doris is of Puerto Rican and raised in North Philadelphia. She has been in social service field for over 15 years, primarily in the behavioral health and child welfare. She received her BA in sociology and criminal justice from Chestnut Hill College, and has an MSW with a concentration in community and policy and a specialization in children and families from Temple University. She has worked as a case manager, a program manager, a group facilitator throughout the years, and currently serves as a director of prevention services at Congreso. And Doris is also an adjunct faculty at Eastern University. Doris loves social work and began as a young child. Her parents migrated from Puerto Rico looking for better opportunities, and with being raised in North Philadelphia, it gave her a front row view of the realities in her community impacted by violence, drugs, and injustices. Despite these things, she credits the same community for always motivating her to go further, remain humble, and help whenever is needed. When people ask Doris what made her pick social work, she replies, "Social work picked me." Thank you so much, Doris.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Luis Rosario. So Luis is a dedicated leader born and raised in the heart of North Philadelphia, and he has carved a dynamic path in education spanning over 13 years. With roots in William Cramp Elementary, Julia De Bargos Middle School, and Edison High School. Luis is committed to serving Philadelphia's diverse student population and is deeply rooted in his lived experience as a Philadelphia public school student. In his role as Assistant Director of Relationships First, the district's restorative justice approach, Luis is a forefront of a mission to disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. Supporting a team that directly coaches 42 schools within the school district of Philadelphia. He is passionately fostering healing and restorative spaces for students and the adults that guide them. His mission is clear: build positive relationships, create healing spaces, and change systems that empower students and adults to succeed together. Luis is a proud son of two Puerto Rican parents who instill values like making people feel at home, feeling self-respect, and valuing experiences of everyone we meet. These are the values he seeks to carry into his everyday work, creating a feeling of mi casa es su casa in every school and classroom he visits. Thanks to Luis for showing up. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, and really happy to be here with everyone.
Nice, nice. Next, we have Joanna Diaz. Joanna Diaz is an educational technology specialist here at the School District of Philadelphia. Previously, Joanna has worked as a bilingual teacher, primarily in the Latino community, and including in International Baccalaureate World School, where she served as a teacher, mentor, coach for the Teacher Advancement Program. In addition, she was a project manager and a professional development trainer for Foundations, Inc., working with education organizations all across the United States, and as a supervisor in after-school programs as well. Here, she also co-authored The Global Graffiti Wall, a guide for educators to bring global learning into classrooms. In this role, Joanna presented at conferences and school districts all over the country. She is a proud product of the School District of Philadelphia and attended J.R. Masterman for middle school, George Washington for high school. She graduated from Westchester University with a bachelor's degree in elementary education, LaSalle University with a master's degree in bilingual and bicultural studies. Joanna also has a certificate in strategic leadership and education from the University of Penn. Thank you so much for joining us, Joanna.
Thank you for having me. I live for these moments.
Absolutely. And final panelist will be Principal Garcia. Luis has served as a principal at Alexander McClure School since December 2021. Under his leadership, the school has seen a 10% increase in reading performance at the highest tier. In addition, regular student attendance of 90+% has risen from a cumulative average of 55%, currently at 62%. In regards to PSSA performance, the school has seen an increase in proficient and advanced scores across all 3 subject areas. According to the most recent student well-being survey, aligned with the school's vision of dismantling system and oppression. In regards to relationships, 84.4% of students agree and strongly agree that McClure staff do care about their needs. Principal Garcia has been an educator since 1998. Prior to serving as principal, he served as a learning support teacher, emotional support teacher, special education chairperson, and assistant principal. In addition to the School District of Philadelphia, other places of employment have included the North Penn School District, Lower Moreland Township School District, and Aspira, Inc. charter schools. He received both his undergrad in elementary education and special education, and graduate in educational administration and special education supervisory. Both degrees are coming from St. Joe's University. Luis grew up in North Philadelphia and is a graduate from Mastbaum High School. He also attended McClure as a student, where he is now a principal. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Principal Garcia. We really appreciate it. So without wasting any more time, let's jump in right into the conversation, if we may. So I have a question for everyone, and I guess we can start with Principal Garcia. So this is a question: how has your cultural identity and heritage shape who you are and inspire the work you do today?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction. So mine is more of an interesting upbringing. So I was actually taught at a young age that to be successful, I had to leave the barrio. I never was taught how to embrace my own culture. And so I worked throughout my young life learning how to blend in to the outside world, so to speak. We were in a neighborhood very infested in drugs, and I understood where my parents were coming from, so they kind of wanted me to escape. It wasn't, I mean, I became an expert in Spanglish, didn't understand arts and music, very good with the food. I love to eat, so I was good with that. But it wasn't many years later when I took on this role, where I started to kind of learn how to reflect on my own culture. You know, I'm looking at the work ethics, and I'm looking at how I push myself each and every day, and I look at how my parents push themselves every day, and think about the barriers we faced. And it wasn't until then that I realized that I was living that culture piece, that energy behind it, a passion is the reason why I am where I'm at right now and how I operate every day. So at the time, I didn't realize that, but now as I continue to lead my community, this is really what has shaped me to this day and continues to shape me.
Nice, nice. I can appreciate that. Let's go to you, Doris. I'll repeat the question for you. How has your cultural identity and heritage shaped you and inspired the work you do today?
Thanks for having me again. I think very similar to what Principal Garcia shared. Some of those things resonated in the way that I was raised and the things that I saw. And I think that for me, again, being raised in Hunting Park, right in the middle of everything, allowed me to see firsthand, right? Just some of the struggles and what my parents were like really pushing for my siblings and I to strive for. So that was really important, but also being connected to the culture was also super important. I think for me, that whole idea of like it takes a village is really impactful for me because it truly did take the whole community. I grew up where my neighbors were my tias and my tios, and everyone looked out for everyone. And so that was really ingrained in me from a really young age. So as I grew up and was trying to figure out my way of what I wanted to do, something that was really important for me was that I still wanted to give back to that same community that helped bring me up, right? And so I know I wanted to give back, I just didn't know in what way, and I found my way to Congress. So, but I think that it's truly about giving back, and that was really important to me. And it came from my experience and my upbringing in the community.
Nice. I can appreciate that. Let's go to you, Joanna. Do you have any thoughts?
So I have actually a very different story. And Louis, Principal Garcia, and I, we go way back. We met in the beginning of our teaching careers at Stetson Middle School. I wrote in my high school yearbook when I was 16 years old for my senior portrait that I was going to be an educator in the Latino community of Philadelphia. So when I say I'm living the dream, I really am, because that's what I said I wanted to do. And I think my experience was a little bit different in the sense that I didn't grow up in the Latino community here in Philadelphia. I grew up in Frankfurt at a time when we were the only other family at all. And so I was different. I was, people looked at me different. People didn't understand where I was from or why I didn't speak English the way that, didn't know words in English. And so my parents sort of had to make a decision early on, because when people sort of bullied me about my language use, I didn't conform. I just got angry. And so my mom and dad figured that maybe it wasn't the best approach. And so then English sort of became the dominant language in our house. And I think by spending summers in Puerto Rico, with my family, I always felt this disconnect, I had a foot in both places. And I felt a little I went to Puerto Rico and it was this beautiful, amazing place. And I had this amazing family with doctors and teachers and all these professionals. And I would come back to Philadelphia and people would look down on them. Puerto Ricans was always the word that I would hear from neighbors. And they thought we were weird, and people just didn't have nice things to say or have a high opinion. And I thought, we're just amazing people. Why don't you see that? And so I decided I could either blend in or I could stand out. And my mother actually is on the Zoom right now. I'm second gen in the district, and she was the only bilingual librarian in Philadelphia for many, many years. And she just encouraged me to just be myself, and to, if people, had something to say or were confused about who I was or where I came from, that I should tell them. And so I think that's sort of what motivated me to become an educator. I spent my entire life explaining to people who I was and the language that I was speaking and where I come from. And one, in the hopes that other people would find it as a beautiful, thing to be, as I did.
Nice. Thank you for that, Joanna. Luz, Dr. Mendoza, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was not born in this country, and so I have a different experience that all the partners who have talked. And I realized that people had they were very invested in their cultural heritage when I came to this country. And when I noticed that they introduced themselves, I am these, and they combined their ancestry with North American. So I was a grad student. I was an educator in Mexico. I came to do my master's and PhD. But then I decided that I had to, as an educator, as several educators are here, I had to spread the knowledge about my culture and sort of try to, the more knowledge we have, the less fear we have towards the other. And I wanted people to know that Mexicans not only drink tequila or wear, big dresses and flowery dresses, they are beautiful, but being a grad student, I was told, you don't look like a Mexican. And I was, how do Mexicans look like? I don't know. And so it was a lot of lack of information. And so I've been doing within the classroom and outside the classroom, spread the information about what it is, who is this group. And so I think that it has been very fulfilling within and outside the classroom. And I'm so happy that everybody decided to share information about their own ancestry and culture, because the more we know, the more we appreciate and we understand each other. That's the goal of everything. We are all in this together in this community. So
100%. I appreciate that. Luis, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say I'm getting so much life from this conversation right now. So, I mean, I definitely fall in the category of born and raised in North Philadelphia, so I feel family here. But so I grew up on A in Ontario. As you heard in the bio, I went to public school all throughout my experience. What's interesting though is that my parents, they grew up on the island. They both grew up in a very rural part of Puerto Rico. It's called Utuado, but basically it's just like the very center of the island. And I kind of was raised by folks who were very country, living in the middle of the city, right? And like for me, I just remember the experience of growing up in the city being like kind of a sheltered experience, even though I grew up literally next to probably like the #1 drug corner in the city. Like I didn't know, because I was like, the house for me was like, it was like a protection. And it, looking back at it now, I recognize what my parents did in order to create a level of safety and a level of I would even say just a serenity in the household. But moving a little bit forward, like going forward in time, so like as I went through my schooling experience, all of my schools that I attended were very close to like 80-90% Latino, Latinx population in the schools. And so for me, it was normal. I didn't realize that that wasn't the norm literally on the planet until I actually went to my undergrad experience. And literally, as I was like talking to all the students, like, oh my God, this is so diverse. It's like, no, they stuck all the diverse students in one building. And as soon as like we walked out, it was like completely different. I went to Penn State. But it was fascinating, like even leaders, like going back, like counselors. I still remember Ms. Garcia, who's still counselor in the district. Dr. Lebron, who was my principal at Edison High School. I didn't learn until I came back and started my education journey that he was like the first Latino male administrator in the school district of Philadelphia. Like for me, that's something that didn't even cross my mind. It was just normal to have role models who demonstrated excellence, demonstrated care, demonstrated service, demonstrated, I'm going to speak to you in your language. I could speak both, like mi casa es tu casa. You come into my school, you're going to feel invited. And so for me, as I think about both the personal and also the professional side, it's like that cultural element, it's like, it makes me feel back at home when I visit. And I feel so thankful that there's role models in our community that showed it's been done before, and now let's carry that torch forward and keep this moving so that we could serve our students.
Amazing, amazing. I really appreciate that, everyone. Let's go to our next question. Principal Garcia, what are your thoughts on this? How can schools and school district offices celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month in a way that is meaningful, but also respectful to the Hispanic community?
So first, I believe there has to be greater efforts in teaching and learning about the different cultures and customs of the Hispanic community. So there are many opportunities to do this throughout the year, like such as when, other than just Hispanic Heritage Month is celebrated, the entire school community can better support and celebrate our heritage in general. So some examples are just different holidays that happen throughout the year, and being able to kind of differentiate and include the different cultures, such as like Three Kings Day, Pan American Day. You have the various Independence Days for other countries and things of that nature. So I think really not living in that 1 month that we're in right now, but looking for those different opportunities and to kind of lift it up to our students and our staff members.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's an amazing answer. So let's move to Dr. Mendoza-Luz. So in what ways can the Hispanic cultural traditions be preserved and also passed down to younger generations in a changing society? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I'm going to second what Luis said. We have to take advantage of all the opportunities that we have, but also we have to go beyond. It is within and outside the classroom. That's my motto of operanda. It has to be within and outside, and it has to go beyond the a taco here, a tango there, in which we just see stereotypes of culture like slices, but they're the superficial slices. We have to present the culture within the framework of where it is. Why empanadas is not just in one country, and when you have empanadas is so many, like food. We are like food. We have so many different flavors depending on where we grew up. And so if we can inject that information into our community in so many different ways, they have to be, whenever I go to schools to do workshops to according to the mission of our nonprofit organization, I like to engage students and show them that, yes, we are similar, and they do similar stuff in their culture. And so they see us as a variation of the other. Yeah, we are short and not short and so on, but the more information we spread between the Hispanic and non-Hispanic, we are going to preserve, respect, and embrace each other's cultures. And I think that's the goal as an educator.
Great, amazing point. Joanna, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I want to kind of sort of like add on to the agreement that I have with my previous speakers. I think it's important as a district that's really diverse. I think we kind of fall into the trap of like from the past, couple decades, that Latinos live only in one area, in Fair Hill, Kensington, North Philadelphia. We are everywhere. We are in every single classroom. I shouldn't say classroom. Every single school in Philadelphia has either an employee that works there, whether it's a teacher, some staff member, or a student in that building that is Latino. And I think we need to recognize that as a district. We definitely 100% do not at this point. So we need to kind of diversify how we engage the community. And I think going to a little bit to what Dr. Matas was saying, in the sense that we have kind of two different audiences, right? So let's just take this month, although I agree with Garcia that we need to have it should be all the time, right? But we have Latino students that need to learn about themselves. We need to learn about each other, right? It used to be a really Puerto Rican community. That was the largest community here in Philadelphia. We are way more diverse than that. We've got kids from all over Latin America that don't know about each other. We, as a society in the general United States, just put everybody together like, oh, you are Latino, but they don't know each other. So Dominicans have stuff to learn from kids that are coming from Brazil, and kids that are coming from Puerto Rico, kids that are coming from Mexico, or are generations in, right? So we have to learn about ourselves. And do we need teachers that are trained to understand the differences in the community, the nuances, and how do we get kids to talk to each other and learn from each other and about our places, Latinos, in the greater world, in Philadelphia and in the United States. And then we also need to engage non-Latinos, right? Those students to learn about their neighbors, their friends, the people that they're going to work with when they grow up, and how do they understand this community? And so I think, you know, something that drives me a little bit bananas over the course of time is walking through schools and seeing flags up, right? I'm always seeing kids coloring flags. And I mean, flags are great. They're pretty. They look nice. But we are not a flag. Like Latino, there's so much richness that goes into a culture. Like cultures are not flags. And you're learning nothing by doing that, right? So we need to have real conversations about you know, articles that are coming about representation and the lack of representation, whether that's in government, you can pull that into a social studies lesson, whether it's lack of representation in the media, whether it's lack of representation in literature. I mean, these are really rich conversations that can be had, right? So it's making sure that we pick materials that are diverse in Latinidad. And it's also making sure that we have a richness of conversations to the audience that we have. And frankly, I don't believe that we do a good enough job in supporting teachers to know about the community. It's more than just sending a link and saying like, here, find out something from, you know, University of New Mexico about like the Latino community. Like that does not teach anyone anything. We need to be having conversations with each other about who we are as staff members in the district, and then how is it that we create really rich lessons to present to our students. Adults are not going to engage kids on any Heritage Month celebration about something that they themselves are not familiar with. You know, and so therein lies the problem. So we can talk about all the big stuff, but if we don't internally make sure that our staff who engages with the students have the information, then nothing happens, nothing changes.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you for that, Joanna. I want to move on to Louise. You have a specific knowledge in restorative justice. So this question will be towards that. What are some best practices of restorative justice, and how can these practices strengthen the relationship between Hispanic students and their teachers in the school community as a whole?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I really appreciate the dialogue. So I'm actually going to refer to some of our panel members here. Dr. Matos mentioned respect. I think respect is like a very important thing across our cultures, for a lot of different reasons, right? We tend to have cultures that are very family oriented, and restorative justice is something that really focuses on respecting the dignity, respecting the humanity of everyone who is in the building. And so we spend a lot of time building relationship between students and adults, utilizing community building circles, doing different events. But the main idea, and you know, Principal Garcia, he's a warrior with this because his school is a relationships first school. But the main idea is that we create time and spaces to pause, to slow down. That we know that there's a tremendous amount of things that we have to do as educators, but we need to spend time to actually get to know our students, because when we know our students, when we're asking them questions, hey, tell me a little bit about what, you know, is going on in your life. What are your dreams? What are your goals? Tell me about your culture. They tell me about where you're from, you know, all of these things. Then we don't really have to recreate the wheel, because we have some really powerful information to then have continuing conversations. And you know, I do have to say this, like when you know something about someone, it kind of cuts away some of the implicit bias. And that goes into the second part of restorative justice. If you look across the district, unfortunately, we still have disproportionality of discipline and suspensions and push out. And, you know, I'm telling you, as someone who went to Egerton High School, the amount of friends who experienced that by the time they were in 10th, 11th, 12th grade, getting pushed out of the school district. And if you talk to students and you ask them, why did you leave your school? A lot of them will refer back to the fact that they didn't have a strong adult relationship to reel them back in. And so restorative justice also creates time when there's conflict, when there's something that maybe a behavior is not like as positive as you want it to be. It creates time for students and adults to have those conversations, say, how can we repair harm if harm is taking place? And how can we make this community stronger? But that requires us to pause and slow down and be curious and have those conversations. And the beautiful thing about our cultures, even though there are a lot of differences, and those are beautiful differences, there is also a level of unity that is there. And like, we don't have to recreate the wheel with that. Restorative justice taps into like that natural respect that we have for each other as human beings, especially when you consider like the cultural traditions and the history. So it also creates time and space for us to celebrate ourselves as human beings. So thinking about that, right? And when a student says, I didn't feel like I had an adult who cared about me, it creates space for that. And imagine how different things can be if every student went through the school district of Philadelphia and said, you know, I actually had a student in South Philadelphia High School, a Mexican student. He said, "Esta mi casa, fuera de mi casa." That's why I wrote it in my in the bio, because he went through a lot to get to South Philly. His trip was trippy. And so like for him to say that, that was like a really hard, it kind of tugged at your heartstrings, right? To hear something like that. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen as much as it could. And I think that we can continue to work together to make those moments more of a consistent thing.
Amazing. I really appreciate that. So I want to direct this next question to Doris. Doris, how important is it for non-Hispanic teachers and staff members to understand Hispanic culture? And what resources or training should be provided for this?
I think it's really important for three main reasons that I found, especially in the work that I do. I think that having that ability to understand students and the family dynamics definitely is important, right? Because you're also discovering on how to better support the student, but also how to support the family in general. It also is going to give you a lot of insight into different things that are going to impact the education of that student. I think the second thing is the appreciation of culture and the traditions and norms and how that's represented in a classroom, and how that can be highlighted and also be seen as a way to connect with the student and connect with their families. In the work that I do, I think it's also really important of knowing and having an awareness of community-based supports and how to connect families to the appropriate services. But it's also really important to do that in a very, how to offer assistance in a very cultural sensitive way. Because in our culture, you know, pride and respect and having dignity is really important. And we don't want to offend families, we want to help them, right? And so the way that a service or assistance is being offered is very important. We want to make sure that they're connected, and they're not feeling, you know, like pride is taking over or they can't accept the help for different reasons. So I think that's really important. But I think it really starts with having those open conversations and having, you know, cultural awareness trainings and being in the know of like how to better support students from different cultures.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Doris. So I want to go to, let's go back to Principal Garcia for our next question. So Principal Garcia, how can schools create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for Hispanic students and their families? I think Doris kind of touched on a little bit about it, but let me hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, what stuck out to me right away is when we discussed that culturally responsive classroom. So how to get to that point. It's really building that relationship. When you're taking that time, to your point, Doris, you're understanding the family, you're understanding the students, you're understanding what makes them tick. It goes way back to their cultural identity, and really taking the time to really create that setting within those four walls in your classroom. It's really, I think, the fastest way to create such an environment. And we have to think about even things outside those four walls. So thinking about like community events and clubs and things of that nature. There's so many opportunities there, but it goes back to you understanding, if you have 23 students in your classroom, what are the 23 stories about them? And then kind of lifting that up. Once you create that setting, and the students really, in a sense, they feel a part of that family. They feel bought in, and once they're bought in, now we're moving to where we need to move. So it really kind of resonates with what Lewis and Doris were saying as well. It really lines up perfectly.
Nice, nice. Luis, do you have any thoughts on that too?
Yeah, well, my first thought is I'm stealing that quote. If you have 23 students, you have 23 stories. So I hope you all mind, Principal Garcia. That's like a takeaway for me. I will say, I absolutely agree. So I had a really beautiful opportunity to actually read at my elementary school this week, and it took me back to I didn't fully start speaking English until I was second grade, but I never felt like that was a thing because the adults who surrounded me were like, they never made me feel ashamed or guilty about that. And I know that that's like a very rare circumstance, knowing what I know now, but that's like one thing, right? Like, our students come in with a massive skill set. Like, the fact that they're learning English means that they already have a full-blown language and cultural knowledge coming into your classroom. So that's the first thing. It's like, how can we tap into that? And so one of the things that this question activates in me is something that we started doing at South Philadelphia High School and some of our other high schools, is that empowering our youth to be ambassadors for the community and also for new students coming in. And so like something that we started doing is we started building community building circles with students in South Philadelphia High School who are Spanish speaking. And we're building up their capacity to act as ambassadors for new students who are transferring into the school. So as soon as you come in, like, you know, you're getting a tour, you have a buddy, you have a mentor, you have someone who can introduce you to like all the key point people in the building. And as time goes on, we're building the capacity of these students to hold community building circles, have conversations. But something that Doris said really hit me in my heart, right? Like, typically the elders in our community are not treated as such, because just keeping it 100, right? When you have like a parent who's coming in, maybe they don't speak English as well. Sometimes that creates a little bit of shame, and maybe they'll be a little bit more quiet than usual. But the missed opportunity there is that that parent oftentimes has so much knowledge that they can share. And imagine a parent sitting in a community building circle, or imagine a parent reading in a classroom and they sharing their life experience. I think that the more that we're able to bring in our whole community into a school building, that aligns with like how a lot of our cultures function, but also is going to create like that level of love and care, because a lot of our parents, unfortunately, haven't had the best of experience. Like, sometimes we have second, third generation parents who went through the school district and they're hurt. And so imagine creating an opportunity for them to come back and say, you know, okay, maybe that first time didn't go as well, but we're gonna do a do-over and bring you into the community and honor who you are as a person. So I think that's something that we could definitely do as well.
I really appreciate that. All great points. So Joanne, I want to go to you for this next question, if that's okay. I think you might have mentioned a little bit about this before. How important is it for Hispanic students to see themselves reflected in their teachers, counselors, and school administrators? What impact does representation have on their academic, but also their personal development?
I feel like so many, I mean, and Luis Rosario, I mean, I think he said it so eloquently, of just like how comforted he felt, how welcome he felt, how not judged he felt in his particular community at Cramp. He was really lucky. And because it's not like that for so many kids. I think back in the day when he was growing up, oh, he's not that old, but back in the day when he was growing up in the late 90s, very often the few Latino, employees that we had in the district sort of fell into going into the schools in the Latino community, right? And so they were there, and so those kids got that representation. But for kids like me who didn't go to school in the Latino community, I never in my, all the years that I was in the school district of Philadelphia, ever had a teacher that was of a Latino heritage, ever. And if they did, they never told me. And that's even my Spanish teachers were not actually native Spanish speakers. And so for me, it was a very, there was a hole, there was a gap of like not feeling like I was a part of the system that exists. I mean, I knew my mother was a librarian, but she was always at a different school. We never were at the same school. And so it was, there was a lack for me of feeling like there was that I could be the teacher, I could be the person in front of the classroom. Only because I had it in my own family did I feel like I could be part of the school district of Philadelphia. But So I think it's really, really important, especially in places where Latino kids are not the majority, right? Where they are just part of the school, you know, the school population. And to be able to see that and to feel that kindred spirit, one of the schools that I work in is Greenberg. And I went into a room, it was in the middle of the year last year. And I walked into the room and there was these like posters on the wall or whatever. And I saw two kids, they were supposed to be like quilts or whatever. And I saw two kids and there was the Puerto Rican flag on the quilts. And I turned around and I said, and I saw their names, you know, when I called out and I said, oh, I'm like, where is, you know, when I said their names and I was like, Boricuas. And the faces, I mean, they like lit up, like they were just so excited for me to say a word that meant something to them. That was almost like a little secret code because nobody else knew what it was. And to just be identified that way was like amazing. And then with not even within a month during PSSAs, I was walking with a kid at Baldy and something was wrong with his passcode, whatever. And I'm walking with him. We had like a kind of a long walk. So I just started talking to him. Hey, what's your name? Blah, blah, blah. And he had a Spanish last name, which is not always the case. I mean, kids have names that might not seem, like you cannot assume when a kid has a Latino heritage, whether it's by skin color, by face, by name, like you cannot tell. So he's talking, but he had the name and I said, hey, I'm like, oh, do you happen to be like from I forgot what the question was I said, like, are you Latino? Like, do you identify that way? And he was like, yeah, my grandmom, she's from Puerto Rico. And I was like, me too. And he was like, and I ended up interviewing him for something that we're going to do later in the year. And I shared it with some of my colleagues. And I mean, his way of like connecting with me just by that little conversation was so meaningful to him and meaningful to me because I'm going to get like teary-eyed, but like I was that teacher for him. And he talked about how he grew up at Anne Frank and whatever, he never had a Latino teacher. And I wasn't his teacher. I was just walking him, you know, to the PSSA thing. But like, there was that like moment of connection that was like so amazing. But that's not to say, no, I'm talking a lot, but I'm looking around right here and I'm seeing that there are teachers here who are not Latino or like there's employees here. And I think you don't have to be the same, have the same identity as someone else to be able to connect with them. And so after I left that room at Greenberg, the teacher came up to me and she asked me later when the kids were not around, she was like, I feel so stupid for asking you this, but can you tell me, like, can you just like help explain to me what is Latino and who is identified as Latino? And the fact that she was so vulnerable with me to ask that question was really awesome. You know what I mean? Because she could have heard me say whatever and never ask and never inform herself, you know, but she saw that I had a moment of connection with those students that she didn't have. And I think that that's really important is like as long as we help our teachers understand how to connect. And I think like what Garcia said in the beginning of like the 23 stories, spend time in the beginning of your year, find out who's in your room, ask the students, don't make assumptions about who's in your classroom, ask them who's in your room. Find out from it. I actually was at a classroom actually this morning at Greenberg and he had the kids all giving 7th graders, they were talking about themselves. And one of the kids was talking about his dad's from Jordan and his mom is Palestinian or whatever. And he was talking about what he eats at home or whatever. And the kids were asking questions and like, this is how you create connections. And Mr. Behan was making a connection with his kids because he's showing them he cares who they are. And he was asking further, deeper questions of that student, you know? And I think so seeing it and making the connections with the same heritage is amazingly powerful. But I think it can be just as meaningful when you see that someone who doesn't share your identity cares to learn about your identity.
I love that and really appreciate it. Amazing points. Dr. Mendoza, Luz, so how can schools and communities use art and music and literature to foster a deeper understanding of Hispanic culture?
I think many of my partners in this conversation have already mentioned it. We have to, every manifestation of art, high or low art, does not exist in a vacuum. And the more access within, again, it has to be within the framework. The United Nations in 2015 put forward the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 4, and that's because I work with them all the time, number 4, and the target 4.7 is to develop the global citizenship citizenry in our students. And the way we're going to do it is by exposing them to experiences within and outside the classroom. Art is such a beautiful way to engage, to teach, and to learn. And I use art in my classes, but also when I work with the community. If I'm with younger students, I put them to dance and I explain what that is, and they understand. So the more we can use art, and also the more we can bring the schools, higher education schools, to institutions, to schools, all the sequence before they get to higher education, and museums. That partnership is so powerful. Right now, we are working with UPenn, the Museum of UPenn, in an elementary school, creating a project. And, you know, the MCC is being the bridge to that. I think we should be, as an educators, we should be bridges of understanding and knowledge. And art is the most motivating way to do it. And I want to recognize and to acknowledge what Joanna just said of feeling that experience. I do not work with kids. I work with higher education students. But whenever I do my nonprofit work and I go to, they say, well, I just have 500 students in the auditorium. And I said, terrific. That's terrific. And then I see that 2, 3, 4 students wait for me at the end of the presentation and want to talk to me and said, or they ask me at the presentation after that, who are you? Why are you here? Oh, well, I'm Mexican and I teach at a university, and you can do it. You should see. I've been stopped at the parking lot to say, you gave these kids, you know, they don't engage, they don't speak in Spanish, but seeing you there, and that's something that we should all try to do. Give a little time of our busy schedules and being a role model. Engage them, show them that it is possible. And hey, art is a great way to do it. So I want to recognize it was very moving, Joanna, to hear that, because I could feel it. I was like, yes, I was about crying when those kids stopped me and the teachers, and I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. It's worthy my long hours of free work.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. What I notice is time always moves fast when we're having fun. So I see we got 12 minutes. We got a few more questions. Let's see if we can get some more of this good information. The next question, I want to go to Doris. Doris, can you talk to like what type of community programs have been successful in supporting educational and personal growth of Hispanic youth and students, but also their families as well?
I'll try to be brief in the essence of time, but I think from what I've seen, and especially at the work that I do, and being at Congreso, there's been a lot of work and program development around like OST programs and making sure that schools are connected and having those services. But also agencies that are doing amazing work like the Lighthouse and Taller Puertorriqueño and APM and Concilio and Congreso, of really tying into those educational goals that we want for our kids and our community. You know, at Congreso, we've been very innovative in tailoring our services based off of the needs of the community. And a lot of that comes from meeting with the community and meeting with different community members to find out what are the true needs and how do we adjust our services based off of that. And so we've, you know, revamped services and created new services based off of that information. But with the main goal of like, how do we promote education and personal growth within the Hispanic community?
Nice. Thank you so much for that. I'll go to Principal Garcia for this one. And I think we did touch on this a bit, but I want to hear your thoughts. What are some ways to encourage greater parent involvement in schools from the Hispanic community?
Yeah, so one of the things when I look at my own experience here, we were a community school, and what we did was we didn't want this building to be known as a school per se. So it's really more of like a beacon of light that we created. So meaning we have events every month, we're inviting families in, but we're also doing food distribution every Thursday, and we have a lot of events. So that what happened, or what's happening now is the parents are getting word, and they're starting to kind of gravitate towards us. And we're intentional with who's actually running it. We have a lot of folks that speak multiple languages, so when they come up, they're not hesitant with speaking about anybody. So I think creating that type of access is what's bringing the folks in here, and is really creating more of that greater involvement on a real basic level. Everything is really when we're sending out communication, everything is translated, and the idea is just really to make folks comfortable. So if we're having events here every month, every other week, that brings in the involvement, it brings in the crowd, and then that's now in a way, it's kind of like we hooked you in. Now we got you in our building. Now we're gonna kind of utilize you to push our scholars up to where they need to go.
Nice, thank you for that. I'm gonna go to Lou. So quick question, you mentioned collaboration a bit. So how can schools and community organizations collaborate to provide resources and experiences for Hispanic families and students? I know MCC does a lot of that, that is somewhat of you mentioned. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, it's, you know, the MCC, we are invited and we go to do presentations on different events that have to do with the Latino community. But also at the university, now there's this push to create, and it is not so recent, to create these collaborations with the community, in which we have students take classes with members of the community. I have done that, and they are on equal footing. Nobody's doing a favor to anybody. Everybody is learning with and from each other. And again, when we create that is, the aim is to create this empathy and understanding of we humans. We are members of our local community. Yes, we can be, we identify as a particular group, but also this local community is connected to the non-local community. And that goes beyond our neighborhood, that goes beyond our country. And we have done that in education, higher ed education, mainly through these collaborations with partners at different locations in the city, but also with international collaborations with, for example, if I teach Spanish, students get engaged with the students in other countries and they learn from each other. But I always say, whenever I propose a partnership, it's on equal footing. Nobody is going to come and discover the world for you. They are going to learn together, respect together. And at the end of these interactions, I had one, a nonprofit that teaches English in the city. Some of my students volunteer there. And the members of the community said, "Are you leaving? Why? When are you coming back?" I was like, yes, the term ends. We really have to go. But it's so fulfilling. And I think the more we create partnerships with education, museums, we have to engage museums, and nonprofits, we are going to make it. That's the way I say it. That's
Nice, I really appreciate that. Let's see if we can squeeze in two more questions, if that's good with the group. So I have two questions that's open to everyone. I know we kind of mentioned it before, but if we can get into some details and specifics, that'd be amazing for those teachers or staff members who are interested. So beyond Hispanic Heritage Month, what ways can schools, and not only schools, but our communities as well, continue to celebrate and honor Hispanic culture throughout the year? So does anyone have any thoughts on like how we can kind of do that? Joanna, all yours.
So I want to make a little plug. I just kind of put it in the chat. So I'm also just, outside of my job, I'm the vice chair on the board of Taller Puertorriqueño, which is an organization. Even though the word Puerto Rico, Puerto Rican is in the title, we really are a pan-Latino organization, and we have a free art gallery which has amazing work from Latino artists from all different backgrounds. It changes, every few months. We also do an author book talks. So Saturdays, Not every Saturday, but if you go onto the website, you'll see like what's coming up. And we have amazing authors that come and do readings for the kids. And so they do like a little activity. The author will speak. If you buy a book, like they'll sign it for you, whatever. There's always like some like little food thing or whatever. So it's wonderful because the kids, they come in and they sit like on the rug. And then they have like the time to like hang out and do whatever. And then the parents are there. It's really a wonderful way to, you know, bring people in, because then once they're there for the book talk, it's like, oh, why don't you go see the art? Like we were just talking about, Luz was just talking about art. It's bringing them in into the organization. They also have after school programs, which are really deep in culture. They do have like some homework time, but they're really like rooted in sewing and like Latino dancing, and other things that really kind of like help engage kids. And all the kids that go there are not Latino, right? So a lot of times it's just parents that are interested in the community, or they live now in the community that's sort of gentrifying, and they, you know, they want to learn, they want to just engage, then they want their kids to be engaged in the community. So I make a plug for that. I know somebody said they wish there was something down in South Philadelphia. I know that there are organizations in the Mexican American community down there. And I think, you know, we as a district need to kind of, you know, we could do a better job of sort of like getting that information and creating better partnerships with the nonprofits so that, you know, it doesn't have to be always in the classroom. Like we have, you know, teachers have like important things that they have to do that are like related to the curriculum and stuff. But I think when you have time to have a discussion about whatever it is, there's an easy way to sort of say, well, let's look at it from the point of view from this community. Like it could be just like one topic. And so it gives kids also a way to engage and learn more about a community, but also other communities by saying, let's look at this topic from the perspective of, right? And if kids don't have that perspective, it's like, let's do a little bit of research. What is it saying, right? When it comes to kids' names, right? That's something that I really like. Teachers, I can't tell you how many times Latino kids grow up and they have people mispronounce their names. And so I think it's incumbent upon, you know, leadership like Garcia and whatever, but also particularly in schools where like there's not Latino teachers to talk about how is it that we like respect our kids, and like, let's ask them how their names are supposed to be pronounced. Let's do our best to make sure that we can say their names, right? Let's give the parents that might not live in the community, but that kid might be Latino. Like, how do we give them also? Because I think it's easy, like when you're in the community around Congreso, like, oh, go to Congreso, go to Concilio, go to Taller. But like, what if you live up in the Northeast, or you live in South Philly, or you live in Southwest? I was in Southwest subbing last year at Bluford, and there was a kid. He had been sitting in there. I got there in October. He'd been sitting in that school for 6 weeks, and not one person could speak to him because he didn't speak a lick of English. He'd just gotten here from Guatemala. And I looked at him and I was like, I could tell he wasn't like paying attention to anything that was being said. He wasn't looking at the adult. And I was like, habla español. And he looked up at me like, like, how is she saying something that I can understand? And like how lonely that kid was. He was 13 in 8th grade, and he was in a community where he was the only. And so, you know, it's making sure that, you know, communities are changing. And so like, let's be cognizant of like, finding out, you know, having administrators make sure that they let their employees know, because maybe employees don't live in that neighborhood. They don't know what's there. Having access to making sure that we're giving things, you know, to our families, I think is really, you know, it's important. It has to be all of us. It can't just be one of us. It has to be all of us sort of in a concerted effort, and not just for the Latino community, but all the communities that are here. And I think another thing that we haven't even talked about in this session is the growing Brazilian community in Philadelphia, and how, you know, the term Latino that we even use, or Hispanic or Latino or whatever it is that we want to use, is really just an umbrella catch-all. And so when families are coming here from Brazil, they're like looking at a form trying to fill out, like, how do I fill this out? Like, what do you mean I'm Latino? I'm from Brazil. Like, they're not understanding this American concept of boxes that we put people in. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us of like to extend that welcome to that community of like, hey, we're not necessarily the same, but how can we bring you in to share and to have solidarity, and for people to like learn and know that if the last name Rodriguez has a Z, they may be from a Latin American country. If it has an S, they're going to be from a Brazilian, maybe they're, from Brazil. And so it's like understanding the nuances. And it needs to be all of us. And hopefully like a panel like today is, you know what I mean, is going to kind of help move that along.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to take the time to thank all the panelists. We really appreciate your expertise, your insights, and your knowledge. We're very grateful for you all to share with us today. We are at 101 minute, and I want to respect everyone's time. So I just want to send a special thank you to the panelists, but also mention to those who are on the call, this video will be uploaded on YouTube. So feel free to use it as a resource. If you have a friend, a colleague that has questions, feel free to send this video. And also feel free to reach out to our office as well. If you need to be connected to some of these advocates and folks throughout the district, we're happy to do so. So I want to thank everyone again, and I want to thank you all for joining, and I will see you next month, hopefully. So have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Have a good one.
Take care, everybody.